Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 27th of May 2011. This is your daily community interaction podcast thingy. I have no other way to describe it. You can send your mail to mailbox@cynicalbrit.com on all gaming-related topics. The game in the background today is the one and only Frozen Synapse, and as I discovered after accepting, I believe, no less than about 15 or so game challenges at once, some guys are way better at this game than I am, but I'm looking forward to playing some more games of it. First email comes in from Ben. It says, "Hello, Totalbiscuit. I believe there's been a severe decline in the number of tactical shooters on the games market, as most of the games I see seem to be over-the-top Hollywood spectacles. Part of the problem with this, I think, lies with console games due to their limited and precise system requirements, creating a wave of instant fun games that dominate the market. For example, the Call of Duty series and Bad Company 2. This has left many game developers having to conform to the mainstream way of developing games. I recently saw a trailer for Ghost Recon Online, which truly saddened me to see that the once stealthy and tactical game has now turned into a generic shooter. While the change had been going on since the original Ghost Recon all the way through to Advanced Warfighter, I still had hope that there would be a revival of old game mechanics of shoot and scoot, but this seems to not be the case. The games I enjoyed were the Delta Force series and the older Rainbow Six games. Delta Force no longer seems to exist, and Rainbow Six has gone towards the mainstream crowd. Part of the fun of games is the challenge in them. One of my favourite games is Arma 2, a milsim game from the developers of the original Operation Flashpoint. Bohemia Interactive continues to have a realism aspect in the Arma series and makes it a truly rewarding experience. Codemasters, on the other hand, who gained the rights to the Flashpoint name, changed the series from a realistic experience to another corridor shooter with Operation Flashpoint Red River. What do you think is the problem with the decline of tactical shooters? Is it a lack of patient audience, a generic shooter-dominated market allowing no competition, or cross-platform interference? Well, I'm not going to put the blame squarely on consoles, and the reason I'm going to do that is because there are a number of fairly tactical games. I'm not going to say crazy tactical games, but there are still popular, fairly tactical games. For instance, I would put a finger on MAG as one of them, and that's a pretty unique game, actually. There's nothing on the PC like MAG in terms of its scale at the moment, unless you count PlanetSide, which is basically dead. And also, something like Warhawk, for instance. The tactical team-based stuff is okay on console, but what you're really talking about is the old school Ghost Recon and the old Rainbow Six games. For instance, I love the old Rainbow Six games. Rogue Spear and Rainbow Six 3 were two of my favorite shooters. The thing is that the whole planning system in those just doesn't work on a console. You need precise mouse control for all of that kind of stuff, and on a console it just doesn't work out. You can see pretty much any attempt to bring it to console didn't work out so well. The original Rainbow Six and Rogue Spear. Rainbow Six was on the PS1, and I think that Rogue Spear was on the Dreamcast as well, and I played those and they didn't work so well at all. So I think that it needs a rethink by any kind of developer. You've got to think, well, what are the limitations of the console, and what can I do to try and get around that and still provide this tactical experience? I think because of the number of people that use Xbox Live, there is actually a big hole in the market that could be filled by some kind of tactical shooter, because a lot of people use headsets, and if they want to go home and get online with their mates and play as a team, I think there's definitely a market for that. I think there's a very large market for it, actually. The thing is that there aren't really all that many console games that fulfill that. And Call of Duty doesn't, certainly. I'm trying to think of anything on the Xbox that does. Halo really doesn't either, so I think the Xbox is pretty much devoid of that kind of stuff, and the PS3's definitely got more of that. You've got Warhawk, you've got Starhawk coming out, and then, of course, you do have MAG, which isn't as popular as, of course, it should be, and it does have its own problems, but people do still play it. So I think it's an interface issue. And as you were saying, it is something about mainstream. I mean, right now, what's popular is big blockbuster shooters like Call of Duty. I think Call of Duty is on the way out, certainly. I think that after Black Ops, perhaps Modern Warfare 3 may suffer a bit. We'll have to see. I'll have to see if people will continue to actually buy those games which promote lone wolf play. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's a skill-based game, but there is a lot of room in the console market as well as the PC market for more tactical games. And I can only hope that people will go for a smarter experience over time, and that getting sick of things like Call of Duty will help. My concern is that Battlefield 3 will turn into another Call of Duty style game as well, as opposed to what Battlefield 2 was, which in an organized clan environment was actually extremely tactical. It's concerning to me. We'll have to see. This one comes in from Tom, and this is a WoW-related question. Hello, Totalbiscuit. I just found that Blizzard has released several blue posts today in response to what I can only imagine is an overwhelmingly negative reaction to their plans for BOT and BWD normals. I can't help but feel that this is them now backpedaling and justifying these actions that they thought would have favourable reactions from the player base as a whole. My real question is, would Blizzard have still gone this far if they had thought that people would have such strong reactions to it? And do you think that Blizzard should start doing something like an email survey, maybe pick 2,000 players at random, or something to start feeling out player reactions to their development attitude? Well, no, I don't really think that they should be listening to the community too much, because we've seen the results of them listening to the community before. What I do think they need to do is actually have a bit more of a backbone in terms of their actual changes and the difficulty level of their content. They also need to accept ownership of the fact that their player base is, for the most part, not particularly skillful, and accept that it's their fault that they are in this situation. Wrath of the Lich King and the development attitudes demonstrated there made people worse players. The nerfs in Cataclysm have made people worse players. This change will make people worse and worse, and if they continue doing this, they will drive the quality of the player base down to such a degree that they will not be able to recover from it. And once that happens, they're in big, big trouble. I'll tell you who matters more. A loyal subscriber that's been playing for a very long time, playing for years, and they have a vested interest in continuing to play the game. That is a much more valuable person than this random trialer who maybe plays up to level 20, maybe buys the game, no expansions, plays to level 30, says, I can't be arsed with this anymore, and leaves. Who is more valuable? It should be blindingly obvious, both monetarily and in terms of the kind of community that you want built around your game. I don't say they're backpedaling, I think they are trying to justify things. They have seen that the community did not accept their original reasoning. And yeah, there are some minor blogs that will go out of the way and say, oh, this is a great change, but at the end of the day, those people are also stupid. And that's something you need to bear in mind. We're talking about people that have absolutely no understanding of game design in any way, shape, or form, and cannot see past their own nose. That's the problem with those kind of people, which is why, of course, they don't get viewed and nobody listens to them. I think that Blizzard sorely underestimates the amount of people within this game that actually get annoyed by changes that don't directly affect them. And this is something that people said, it's like, why do you care? It doesn't directly affect you. Well, I care because I care about the state of the game and not just the state of my own personal experience with it. And if I see the game going downhill, deviating from policies that it's had in place, as well as Blizzard's development attitudes shifting to the point where they actually start developing bad content and don't care about their old school player base anymore, then that I see as a problem. A lot of people see that, and there's been a massive amount of objections to these changes, and yeah, it's from a lot of people that it doesn't actually affect, but it will affect them eventually. It's a long-term thing. Normal players have to play with bads every single day, and if the game continues to promote bad behavior and bad playstyles, then they're going to be affected by that. It's going to lower their enjoyment to the point where they don't want to play anymore. I don't think Blizzard are going to reverse these changes, honestly. I really, really don't. They are too sweeping. They're not just going to turn around and say, actually, no, we realize this is a terrible idea, as much as I wish that they would. And that would also show weakness, I think they perceive on their part, and it would show that the community can back them into a corner over a certain issue. Unfortunately, every now and again, a community actually should be backing them into a corner on certain issues. Most of the time, I think that they should just follow their own attitudes, but really, I want to know what their long-term plan for this game is, because I can't see this model as being sustainable for more than a couple of years now. It's just annoying too many people, and people are getting too sick of it, and finally, there is some real competition in the form of Rift, as well as the forthcoming games Old Republic and Guild Wars 2. This one comes in from Coriander that says, hey TB, I've got a fairly opinionated question for you. I was one of the many people who jumped into the DC Universe boat when the game launched. I fell in love with its God of War and Bayonetta-style charms, and loved how it seamlessly merged itself into an MMO-based game. Sadly, as far as the PC version goes, I don't know about the console version, the game is slowly starting to wither and die. This is a shame to me. The dungeon, the duo, and raid content was some of the most breathtaking, fast-paced, razzle-dazzle MMO content I've ever played. Me and my league and guild still linger, still do the raids, and still get plenty of enjoyment out of it, but it's clear that the game is withering away unless something is done and fast. It's a dilemma for my league, but at the same time, it was me wondering what went wrong. So what do you think? For the larger scope of things, an action MMORPG is new turf. Fantasy Star Online did some success, but it wasn't quite as fast-paced in terms of its action like Vindictus and DC Universe Online are. I absolutely love the concept, but I'm not quite sure what needs to be done for it to succeed. Do you have any ideas? How should an action-style MMO be handled? How do you make a success out of a non-push-button MMO without losing your subscriber base in mere months like DC Universe did? Can it be done? Or is the world just not ready for a non-hotkey MMO yet? I hope they are. I've tasted the persistent God of War style MMO combat and I'm not ready to let it go quite yet. I think this is the direction that MMOs are going and they should be. However, I don't think people are quite ready for it yet. It was a brave attempt, but then again, we're also talking about SOE, and as much as I love some of their games, they have this tendency to not properly support their titles. They don't put enough content in there. They did prepare some endgame content, but you can blast through the leveling very, very fast. I mean, when I was doing my videos, I was not going at a fast pace at all, as you can clearly see. I maybe played 10 to 12 hours of that game in terms of the videos, and I had no real intention of going into the endgame. I just wanted to play around, and it was pretty fun for the time. It is unfortunate that the game is starting to wither and die, but I think that it's directly as a result of the fact that companies consistently underestimate, with the exception of Trion Worlds, I might add, they consistently underestimate how fast people can get through the content. And in the case of DC Universe Online, it didn't front-load the content per se, but it had a lot of money banked on its leveling content, and its endgame isn't quite as good. There are no doubt other problems with it that I haven't experienced because I've not gotten to the end game yet, but they need to do what Rift did whenever they release a new MMO, which is just assume that the people who are going to pick up your game are basement dwellers who will go through the game as quickly as possible and get to the end game content, and if they are not catered to, then they will immediately leave, and once that happens, you're in trouble, because once those guys start leaving, then the next guys to get to max level start leaving, blah 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 blah. I think that if a game is going to be successful, especially in the action MMO style of thing, they probably need to push the PvP aspect quite a lot more. There was certainly some PvP in DC Universe Online, and it was pretty good, but I think maybe something a bit more persistent, some kind of metagame going on right there, taking over territory, the kind of thing that will keep people playing and logging in. Have a look at EVE Online, for instance. EVE Online doesn't even have an end game per se. The entire game succeeds on how dynamic it is, as in, the game is changed by the people playing it, as opposed to in, say, DC Universe Online, where the game is static. If you are going to build a theme park as opposed to a sandbox, you better damn well make sure that there are enough rides in that theme park to keep people interested, because if there aren't, then they're not coming back. Someone comes in from Ethan and says, so I've been gaming since the age of 7. I started out with the old Game Boy, one of those old white bricks with really crappy sound and major battery drain. They weren't that bad, good lord. If you ever owned a Game Gear or an Atari Lynx, that was bad. Anyway, when I was about 12, I started playing MMOs. RuneScape and the like were what I played the most, loving the feeling of a big expansive world with lots of other people. The question, combat, skill levels, and creative aspect really drew me in, with the community aspect only adding to my enthrallment. It was about 6 months later when I heard about this game called World of Warcraft. Asking my 2 older brothers, they told me that this was a bad online game that made people abandon their children, which I can't say drew me to it all that much. After a while, though, I decided to download it and play the trial version. I immediately fell in love with it, seeing within everything I saw in RuneScape, with the added bonus of actually having graphics that looked half decent. This was 5 years ago now, and I'm still playing, although like yourself, I've quit several times due to frustration, lack of interest, or other issues. Over that period, I've mentioned WoW to several of my gaming friends, asking what they thought about it. The general reaction is, World of Warcraft, you mean that online crack habit? Which really tends to take me aback. On many online forums as well, WoW seems to be one of those focal points of ridicule, with people slandering it with the whole addictive, stupid, and nerdy. Whilst I'm not getting riled up over it, it surprises me that people posting in online video game forums are pointing to something as stupid or nerdy when games are really the center of nerd culture. Admittedly, most of these people probably stick to games like Modern Warfare and Battlefield Bad Company. Shoot-'em-ups have never really been my sort of game, myself being more into RPGs and puzzles. To cut to the point, my question is this: what exactly do you think is the reason World of Warcraft has such a bad reputation amongst some gamers and the general populace? It seems the media has done its fair share of fear-mongering, and you can't really expect all that many people to think for themselves. But considering it's a game with more than 12 million subscribers, it isn't doing all that bad. The stigma associated doesn't seem warranted. Do you think that people just need to be better educated on the subject of MMOs? Yeah, pretty much. There is a lot, and I do mean a lot of responsibility to be laid at the feet of media organizations for spouting this kind of nonsense. The whole addictive thing has been around for ages. You may have seen the video that I actually recorded 5 years ago now. It was a lecture that I gave over at the UAT in Arizona in 2006. And while those views have certainly been colored by the last 5 years, I still stand by what I said there, that the idea of addiction to online multiplayer games is an irresponsible piece of labeling, and that it doesn't tackle the real root cause of it, which is, generally speaking, the kind of guy that gets addicted to an online game can get addicted to almost anything due to an underlying addictive personality issue that needs to be treated. And there have been several experts that have come out and said exactly the same thing over the past few years. Good example would be the video game addiction clinic that opened up in the Netherlands, and the founder of said clinic, goes by the name of Keith Bakker, as I recall, then went on to 2 years later admit that actually gaming isn't addictive, and what they were actually treating was a social problem as opposed to some kind of addiction. So we're talking about a guy that owns a major game addiction clinic. He's the head guy over there, yeah, he's the founder, and of course it's in his best interest to say the games are addictive, because of course it would get him more money, because more parents send their kids there, turning around and saying, no, actually it's not addictive, and excessive game use is often due to social insecurities, and that's treatable, but it's not an addiction, it's not the same thing, and you shouldn't treat it as an addiction, because it doesn't work. It's as simple as that. It's like trying to treat a broken leg with cough medicine. It just doesn't work. And I believe there was also a debate back in 2007, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when they revise the addiction manual, I think, which is happening in 2012. In 2007, in a major debate between doctors and psychiatrists, they said that no, video gaming is not addictive and we are not going to class it as an addiction, but they would revisit the issue in about 5 years' time, which will be next year. It's pretty nonsensical, honestly. I think that it's very much insulting to people that have genuine addictions, and we're talking about either chemical addictions or deep-seated psychological issues, to say that, oh, well, this is addictive and this is addictive. It trivializes the issue, and that's not fair to anybody, and it's also bad in terms of its treatment, because oh, this guy's just addicted to that, let's just shovel him away into a little corner there. It's just easier for us to classify it that way than to actually tell the truth and really get to grips with why people are playing an awful lot of video games and not doing an awful lot else. Nobody is claiming that playing video games for 18 hours a day is healthy. Nobody is claiming this. But what they're trying to say is, look, if this guy plays a lot of video games but is otherwise healthy, has a reasonable social life, etc., then why exactly do you have a problem with him? World of Warcraft is an easy target for this whole, oh, this is just an addictive crack game or whatever. EverQuest used to be the last target. At the end of the day, it's basically online Dungeons & Dragons. And Dungeons & Dragons was demonized to hell back in its day, and now World of Warcraft is getting the same treatment. And it doesn't help that you got things like, say, South Park taking the mick out of it either, and I'm not blaming South Park for it, it was hilarious, but a lot of people take this silly cartoon way too seriously, and sadly that seems to be a common theme amongst gamers. Gamers tend to treat games like sports fans treat their chosen teams, and they will get very, very belligerent with people that don't support that team or support another team that they don't like, all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of to be expected. For the most part, it's a bit of healthy competition, but honestly, sometimes I go on forums and I feel very embarrassed to be a gamer, and that's a sad, sad thing indeed. Okay, folks, that is me done for the day and for the week. This will run on Monday through to Friday, just to let you know that, and you can email in to mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. That is mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with your discussion topics for next week's show. Please have a safe and enjoyable weekend. My name has been Totalbiscuit, and I will see you next time.